There's absolutely a collective awakening. And you can see it around you. You said there's a lot of hate and division in the United States right now. And it is true, it's worldwide, not only the United States. But at the same time, a parallel process is more and more people coming together. More and more people are talking about spirituality not in a dogmatic, following rules kind of way, the way the old religions are, but in a way of true inner journey and discovery. And again, we're emphasizing the discovery here. It's not reaching, a certain place and that's it. I'm ascended, I'm enlightened, I'm there. It's really just a journey of discovery and unfolding, unfurling into our true nature and our pure light. And we're seeing that more and more. It's even okay now to talk about it in the mainstream. Even the psychological field talks about energy psychology and other conversations that are bringing in spiritual reality into our reality.
To a Broaderlands podcast.
The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcasts are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast.
Dr. Yafi Yair, welcome to Broaderlands podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Hope I got your last name right, because I was afraid
You did, which is impressive. Not everybody does.
Yeah, I've been listening to you, and you also have a new book out, right?
Yes, Conversations with Hathor. It was published earlier this year, so it's brand new.
And you have another one on Earth, right? Communication with Earth.
That's right, Conversations with the Earth. That was my first book. So that was out last year. So far I'm about a book a year, but I may have to take a year off because it's a lot of work.
I bet. You know who wants to say hello, probably, I feel like, is Thich Nhat Hanh. I don't know if you ever heard of Thich Nhat Hanh, but I think I felt his smile when I was looking into your communication with Earth. He wrote a book called Love Letter to Earth, and he was a mystic, a Zen master who passed away about 3-4 years ago. A hero of mine. I learned most of his teachings. I've learned a lot from him. He helped transform me through his teachings in many ways. So
yeah, my first book, Conversations with the Earth, has a lot of my love for the Earth, of course, but also it's interesting because it's different sources communicating through me that I didn't necessarily think was possible. So, for example, the first chapter opened with fire consciousness. And then I channel water consciousness and wind consciousness and the spirit of trees. And then it gets more galactic and more out there, but the focus is still the earth and humanity. But there's a lot of earth wisdom there. And before I started this channeling journey, I had no idea how different elements and energies within the earth has such wisdom to share with us and so much to teach us.
Yeah, thank you. I want to get more into that a little bit later. For sure. But do you believe anybody could be channeling, even like mystics like Thich Nhat Hanh, for an example, a Zen master who doesn't acknowledge channeling, but, through intuition?
Yeah. So there are two separate questions there. Can anyone channel? Probably with the right amount of self-work, inner work, and practice. Probably anyone. That would be similar to anyone that has any musical abilities. Can anyone play the piano? Well, some will be better than others. Some require more practice than others. And the ceiling of potential will be different for different people. So it's the same with channeling. But as I said, there are two questions there. So the other part of it is what is channeling, and not everything is as straightforward or as obvious as what I do, for example. So there are trance channelers, verbal channelers like me. So I put myself into a trance and words come out, right? That's the verbal part. Although light language too, but for the purpose of this discussion, we can call it verbal channeling. So that's one form of channeling. But most artists are channeling. And they don't have to call it channeling, but they reach a state most athletes, right, at a really high level of performance, on some level, they enter that zone where they're in the flow. And, I work with some athletes actually. And one of the things that they describe is that when they're in that state of flow, it's almost like they know just a few seconds before where the ball is going to go. I work with tennis players, where the ball is going to go and what's going to happen on the court. So without them calling it channeling, or without them even calling it intuition, they have that state of knowing. So it's kind of similar. It's not exactly the same, but there's a huge overlap. And the conclusion of this discussion is that anytime that you're in the flow and that you are in a total state of allowance, you are doing if not channeling, that's something similar or related to it.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. I appreciate it. I would love for you to share your upbringing and any journey, your upbringing and journey from traditional psychology to multidimensional channeling, and maybe share a little bit about your childhood. Did you have any experiences that helped shape your path to this point?
Yeah, I was an unusual child from the beginning. Even when I was, I think, as young as 4 or 5 years old, I would run experiments with energy and experiment with energy coming out of my hands. I would test my abilities to get into people's minds. As this little child, I wanted to levitate. So I had all these wild ideas as a small child. And then when I was 8 years old, approximately, I actually don't know the exact age, I had a daylight sighting of a spaceship. It was a bright light in the sky, and it was at first still, then doing these round zigzags, and then it took off. And I was there with my friends standing, amazed, looking at it. And that really helped opened my mind, as I was raised in a very secular, very intellectual and not spiritual family. So an experience like that really opened my mind and kind of changed my paradigm, that all my weird ideas and weird experiments and all of that they do have some basis in reality, that it's not just me with my wild ideas, which is what my mom made me feel, oh, me and my ideas and me and my nonsense. So that gave me some validation that there is magic out there, that our reality is more than it seems and more than we know. And it's okay to dream in that way and see things in that way. And it's not like since then I was full on in spiritual belief and spiritual journey. I was still raised again with this intellectual, non-believing family, and I chose a field of study, psychology, that it's very, very, again, left brain, scientific, with the exception of Jung and a few others. Actually, maybe just Jung, especially if you're talking about the OGs. Nobody really talked about intuition. Nobody talked about spirituality. And if anything, there was an intentional distancing with anything of the unknown and anything spiritual, which is really strange considering the human mind. We're more subconscious than conscious. But, the science mainstream field tends to lean away from that. So as a part of my training, I really almost abandoned my intuitive side. And then in 2012, possibly 2011, I had an explosion of interest in anything spiritual. Mm-hmm. It was the last year of my doctorate. So it was almost time to be on my own in the world. I was still working for others, but I was getting close to that point. And I became so interested in hypnosis and the subconscious and human potential. And I discovered past life regression and life between lives, which fascinated me. And I started meditating daily and connecting to my own intuition. And then just a few months after my initial awakening, a few months to a year, but less than a year, my mom transitioned. She was diagnosed with cancer, and within 2 months she transitioned. So it was very, very fast. And that made my journey very personal. It really made me want to connect even more urgently. And I wanted not only to connect to my own intuition, I wanted to communicate to my mom, with my mom. I wanted to have, um, I would say back then I would probably call it paranormal experiences, although now I see them as very normal. And that really boosted me on my journey because, again, it became so personal and so urgent and so relevant to explore anything spiritual and paranormal.
I love that. I love how you said, you as a little kid, I remember myself, personally, I remember like I had glimpses of like memories of like I've been here before, or I know this environment, I lived here before. Even what we call the future, like Star Trek and Star Wars, I share that all the time. I've always felt like I had this inner knowing I've been there, something similar that it gave me like some kind of remembrance, whether it be like a scene in Indiana Jones to that old kung fu movies and translated into English in ancient China. Like I had these, like I've been to these places before, but then I got flooded with the worldly conditioning and then the trauma and the experiences with life, and then I got caught up in that until my awakening in 2009. Then I had a lot of mysticism come to me, so I definitely can relate to what you're saying. Why do you believe some of us come in remembering stuff or just feeling different, weird? I know some of that could be trauma, but some of that could be brought into this life.
Yeah, I think a part of it is the times that we're living. And so just if you compare the frequency of the earth and of humans in general, in terms of we're talking about the baseline, today versus 20 years ago, 40 years ago, and the further we go back, we're changing. The frequency is changing. And a part of it, because the frequency is raising, we're getting closer and closer to that threshold that we call the veil. And I think a part of it is just that our frequency is changing. So more and more of us have more flexibility in retrieving memories, or like you said, it doesn't have to be vivid memories, right? So it's not only I come here and I remember everything, which happens to very few individuals. They actually remember being in the womb before being born. But for most people, the way it comes through is as remembrance. So things feel familiar. You develop some skills more quickly. And the music is actually a perfect example of that. How some people come into the world and they already have that musical hearing. So yes, they need to practice like everybody else, but some of it, they already came with it. And it's not like they remember, oh, I was Beethoven or I was Handel or whatever. But what they remember is how familiar music feels and how easily certain things come to them musically. And that is the type of memories many of us are coming in with. So they're not necessarily visual memories, but knowings and tendencies and proclivities for certain things.
Yeah, thank you. As a kid, I would have like dreams all the time, like astral travel and stuff. I don't have that today. I don't even remember my dreams today. But when I was a kid, I had that going on all the time. It seemed like, but I felt weird. I never told anybody this stuff. That kept it in my little inner world. But yeah, it was just interesting. But I don't remember. I never remembered life in between lives that you mentioned. What do you know about life in between lives?
Yeah, we all have. So first of all, our real life, our more permanent life is between lives, between physical lives. Is our spiritual life? This is our spiritual reality. So you've probably heard the saying, we're not humans with a soul, we're souls with a human body. And it's true. So when we're talking about life between lives, we're just talking about little bits and pieces that we can remember and we can experience. And we can also experience that with hypnosis, which is some of what I do, of what do we do? What did we do? What do we do between those incarnations, between those physical lives? And when you talk about life between lives, you're really, again, talking about a pretty narrow perspective of our spiritual lives that directly relate to our physical lives. So they often include meeting our guides, some kind of a reunion with our spiritual friends and family. You often talk about meeting with a council, with doing some kind of a life review, and at some point before the next entrance into the physical, some preparation into the new physical life, and some preview of some important moments in that future life, and maybe the selection of the parents. Oh, look, this is going to be my parents. Are they going to help me work on this, which I want to work, or develop this, which I want to develop? So when we're talking about life between lives, that's usually what we're referring to, the preparation and the review of our physical lives and the healing that is done between those physical incarnations.
Yeah, thank you. What's your take on, being from Israel, right? Weren't you raised in Israel?
Yes.
What's your take on people saying that the Hebrew word Elohim is plural, connecting it with otherworldly beings like the Anunnaki? What's your take on all that?
Well, the word is plural. That's not somebody saying it. The word is plural. There's no other way to understand it. And even as a little child in Israel, they do teach you the Bible. Even in very secular schools, it's a part of Bible studies. And they even, as a small child, which is really nice that they harness this openness. So let's say third grade or even second grade, they were teaching us the Old Testament. And one of the first words, of course, is Elohim, which is God. And they say, yes, you notice that the word is plural. What do you think it means? It's a mystery. So there are hypotheses out there, and then we'll show us some interpretation of why. But they will essentially leave it up to us, as even as little children. Why do you think it is? It's a mystery. And I still believe in that. So we can say that we have answers, and we can talk about specific names that were given to other high beings like Anunnaki. But really, we don't know. We don't know why the word is plural. I think it's definitely a hint that although the Old Testament really emphasizes one God, that there are maybe other layers to that reality. And that's a real indication that, again, even in the Old Testament, where they forbid worshiping other gods, and they really emphasize there's only one God, there's this leftovers, this hint that there's more to reality than just one God.
Yeah, I worded it like that because there's a lot of Christian scholars that may try to, debate that.
Yeah, there's no debate. It's a plural word. The debate could be what it means. And you can't really even say that it doesn't mean anything because every word is chosen so deliberately and with such care. And there's so many hidden messages within the Bible, within the words, what letters were chosen. It's really its own poetry. So it's definitely did not happen by mistake or by coincidence. The only real debate is what does it mean? And I think today, with the understanding that there are different beings that even in charge of different aspects of creation, or maybe different universes, different dimensions, there's so many different ways to understand it. And again, I prefer to stay open rather than to have a very definite opinion. But it's obvious that our reality and our true nature is very, very complex and very layered. And I think that's the indication. If nothing else, we can take from it that indication of how layered everything is in terms of our understanding, in terms of our reality, our nature, and all the many dimensions that exist.
Yeah, thank you. The mystic Lao Tzu once said, to learn something every day is knowledge. To let go of something every day is wisdom. So I always stay open. I don't really cling on to my belief systems because that can block me from higher levels of understanding and consciousness.
Absolutely. And as humans, we're always expanding, we're always growing, we're always learning more and always changing. And I agree with you, the more we're married to certain beliefs and the tightest we hold on to them, the less we allow ourselves the opportunity to grow and to change. And that is true about science too. The whole idea of science is that it's not dogmatic, that it asks questions more than it answers. And I think it's important that today's scientists don't lose that idea, don't lose that sentiment. Because even in the past, um, people were ridiculed for discovering new ideas. And we want to be careful not to make the same mistake again, but to stay open, whether we're scientists, spiritualists, or just humans.
Yeah, thank you. I look at everything as a flowering of consciousness, not like, well, you copied the Egyptians or you copied the Sumerians, the Hebrews and, or Christianity or in Islam and all the other religions and traditions. But, so that's how I look at it. And, it's more healthier for me to look at it that way. Like, but do you feel there's, you talk about Hathor, but maybe even channeled Hathor or the Hathors, this collective. But have they ever told you anything about, how like ancient Kemet, Egypt, a lot of the Hebrew scriptures kind of like elaborated off of Kemet or the Sumerians, and then in Christianity and then, Islam, and then it's just like a flowering of consciousness, like these stories, they change storytelling, archetypes, even principles. That I think they're all universal principles. But like you can say the 42 laws of Ma'at were before the 10 commandments. You can find those 10 commandments in the 42 laws, but they're universal principles. I don't know. I just kind of see it all flowing together as we evolve.
Yes, so the way they really addressed it is when we asked them, and when I say we, I'm talking about the group that's asking questions. So when I channel, I'm not the one asking questions. So I rely on my group and the people that are around me to ask the questions, and as I channel, they is now Hathor, and the guides answer. So when we were asking about Hathor, so the name Hathor came to me. I was not familiar with Hathor. I didn't know what it meant. And then I learned that it's an Egyptian goddess. That's where we know the name from, Hathor. And we asked them, so is that what's communicating with us, an Egyptian goddess? And they answer, well, names are really kind of neat categories, neat boxes that humans like to use. So the name Hathor is one name that has been given to our essence. That's what they answer. But over different civilizations, different eras, different humans gave us different names. So they gave examples of Venus and Aphrodite. These are some names that were given to our essence. Kuan Yin. This is one name that has been given to our essence. So just like you said, it is different understandings, different layers of the same concepts, the same names, the same teachings, but they wear different contexts depending on who is the one discovering and teaching those.
Yeah, thank you. Have you been to the Hathor temple? Maybe have you connected with Melissa Till?
No, I don't know who that is, but I have been to Egypt a couple of years ago, and I did go to Dendera, the Hathor temple, and I thought it was incredibly beautiful and awe-inspiring. The grandeur of everything and the art, and then of course the energy was just, everything about it is just incredible. And I'm taking actually a small group to Egypt this coming January. And of course, we'll also visit the Dendera, the Hathor temple. And I remember when I was there with my husband and a whole group. And like I said, it was just incredible. You just look up and the colors of the paintings of the ceiling, everything is just so beautiful. You don't know everything is so amazing that you don't even know what you're feeling first. It's just incredible. And as we're walking to the temple, all of a sudden at the end, it looked like it was the end and there was a security guy, but then he showed us there's another place to go like downstairs and we're like, oh, it's not allowed. And he's like, yes, come in. And the next thing, I'm expecting him to ask for money because that's the way it works in Egypt. And he just ushers us in, and it's just me and my husband. It was like a magical moment. We go downstairs and we enter this room, and we were the only ones there. Nobody else is there. The security guy didn't even ask us for money. And we were in this room with all these glyphs around, and the energy was so palpable. It was just incredible. And so I immediately told my husband, we have to capture some spirits here because I feel them. So I had him take a video first, or a picture or a video. Think a video first, just like this. And I'm like, okay, now I'm going to call them. Now take a second video. So I went inward and called the spirit, and I took the video, and there were orbs everywhere, just shooting all around me. It was just incredible, the amount of spirit and energy that was in that room. And it's like a miracle that we had the room all to ourselves, and we could experiment with different pictures and videos and feel the energy. And it was just added to the magic of that visit.
I love that. It's such a fascinating place, and it's very beautiful. I've been there a couple years back as well. Might have just missed you.
Yeah.
What's interesting is I talked about that flowering of consciousness, and the word hieroglyphs means sacred writings, but in the ancient Kemetic wording, it meant metoneter, which is God's words. And later the Bible is the word of God. You talk about the rise of the divine feminine, right? Which I find interesting because the Gnostic texts, I don't know if you familiar with the Gnostic Gospel, the Nag Hammadi Library, the Gospels, but Thunder, what was the name of that? Thunder, the Perfect Mind, which is a feminine tone to it in Greek. But it acknowledges the goddess of ancient Egypt. And the Greek goddesses. It was like a poem, and I'll send it to you. It's like a poem that they acknowledge the divine feminine. And sometimes I wonder if, you see the great Kemetic Ankh, and it has the female and the male, aspects to it. And then later it becomes the Christian Roman cross, and they took away the feminine aspect, that oval, the womb part for creation. And I was wondering, do you feel like some of the Abrahamic religions, like Christianity, took away the divine feminine?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was the desire of the people in authority to keep women and the populace in general under control. And a part of control is fear. And of course, if you take the intuitive side, and also women are smaller physically, they tend to be weaker physically. So there was this domination of the patriarchal society of the men. And I think it's definitely a part of it. But it was, you could blame religion, but we can also see it as humanity going through this whole process and very long period where it fully explored the masculine side, the side of control, the side of doing, the side of electronic and digital development, the technological revolution. So we definitely went full on towards the masculine side, leaving the feminine behind. And now it is our opportunity to rediscover it, and not in order to abandon the masculine side, but to bring it back into harmony so we can be more whole, integrated, both individuals and also society.
I love that. And would you say when we do that for ourselves as an individual, when we bring that, integrate that male and female energy, and we bring it into one, that's enlightenment? Because like in the Gospel of Thomas, I think it was verse 22 or 22, but he says when the two become one, the male and the female, bringing it together, integration.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's really a beautiful way of putting it. And, we all have different aspects to ourselves, and enlightenment or enlightenment sounds like we get there and that's it, we stay there. And it's really not it. It's a journey, it's a process, it's a forever journey. It is about the journey. But the journey is one of integration and harmonizing. Absolutely. And the way to find balance, the way to find harmony, the only way, I would say, to find balance and harmony is to call these different aspects of the self, including the masculine and feminine, right? Jung called it the anima and animus, but it's the same idea of bringing our different parts, especially our opposing parts, and bringing them together.
I love that. Are you ever afraid of, like, they talk about false light entities? Are you ever afraid, or what do you do to protect yourself as being a channeler from these false light entities? Or
Yeah, I believe the best form of protection is one, awareness, and two, keeping yourself at a the highest frequency as possible. And I think the combination of those two generally prevent any negative experiences, at least within the spiritual realm, and especially when you're talking about connecting to guides, whether it's channeling or just connecting to your own intuition. The more you are clear of fears, and I would say doubts, but some doubts are very normal and very human. But if you're consumed with doubts, maybe you're not in the healthiest place. So you want to make sure that you are well, that you are as balanced as you could be, as open and grounded as could be. And also you want to be very clear with your intention. And if your intention is to connect to the highest possible guide or to the highest aspect of yourself to receive messages and guidance and insight, if you're really clear about that intention, there's really nothing else that can reach you. And the other thing that I mentioned is awareness, because awareness is learning to know yourself, right? Know thyself. And if you really know yourself, you know when something else is interacting with you, and you know if it's something that you prefer to interact with or not. And if it's not, even just that awareness could be enough for you to be fully sovereign in your own light and in your own space and not allow anything else to interact with you. Again, unless you choose to. This is our realm and our choosing how we want to be and who we choose to interact with, both in the physical and in the spiritual.
I love that. Could you define what an archetype is for us?
Yeah, so when you talk about archetype, you talk about the most general understanding you can have of a concept. So one archetype that's really relevant to what we're talking about is the divine feminine, right? So that's the archetypal mother. So an example of the attributes of this archetype, that it's very nurturing. So think about the mother, what the most general overall arching umbrella of mother can be. So we're talking about someone who is very nurturing and loving and caring and being able to hold the loving space and to nurture and care for a child. So now when we're talking about the archetypal mother, these are the characteristics, the attributes that we're talking about. Another famous archetype is the one of the hero. And now we're talking about the hero's journey. And so the archetype is of a flawed, but also very promising, often men, but of course, that's again the patriarchal influence of our society, because hero can be a man or a woman. Each one of us is on our personal hero's journey. So flawed, but lots of potential. All of us are going on our journey and getting over obstacles in order to find our strength, or to acknowledge and find our own inner strength and overcome whatever obstacle is in our way and become the hero. So that's another archetype, which is the archetype of the hero.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I always like learning about archetypes, even egregores. Like, can we create entities with our belief systems?
Hmm. Yeah, they actually did an experiment when they wanted to create an entity, and that group that wanted to create that entity all came up with a background story, the entity's name, what was I think it was a him. What was his background story? What personality type this spirit had? And then they held a séance, and they called that spirit. And to their amazement, some spirit, they said it was the spirit they created, but I guess that can be questioned as well. But the spirit they created, they conjured, actually communicated with them. I think it was through a spirit communication board, but I'm not 100% sure how they got the answers. So the idea was that they supposedly verified that a spirit can be created and conjured just with our own intention.
That's interesting. And it shows how powerful we really are, right? Kind of like the placebo effect.
Yes, but but then it comes into question, did the spirit that they create, did they really create? Or maybe another spirit that was able to came through and just said, sure, I am Jacob, whatever the name they gave the spirit. So we don't really know what happened there. So it seems more of a validation of the ability of the reality of spirits and our ability to interact with them, rather than the specific conclusion that they reached, which is that they were able to create the spirit just with their mind. That being said, I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying there are other options. And now we don't know what is real, right? Is Santa Claus real? There are millions, if not billions, of people for many, many years now that believe in him and that talk about him. If you talk about children, actually believe in him. If you talk about adults, still pretend that he's real and engage in that dynamic. So if a small group of people can possibly create a spirit just with their intention, what can we say about beings, mythological beings, and beings that we intentionally created, like Santa Claus? Maybe we gave them some form of reality. And if we did, to what extent? Where do they live? Where do they exist? What is their ability to actually interact with our consciousness?
That's interesting. And we can also create them as a positive and a negative, what we call negative and positive, right? Like a
Mm-hmm.
darker force or like a more positive. Because if you think about Christmas, everyone's like, it seems like everyone's on a higher vibration, humanity, at least in America. And it just, everyone's more loving, more serviceful, more thoughtful for that
Mm-hmm.
brief time.
Yeah, any spiritual creation is a projection of us. And as you know, we have our dark side, our light side, we have our wounds, we have our gifts, and everything in between. So we can create anything that we want because we're really projecting our inner world into the outer world.
Hmm. So how do you look at what we call God in a traditional lens? Like you think of Yahweh for an example, and you can hear some negative scriptures like, "Whoa, this is this really God?" What's your take on that?
Yeah, Yahweh is another name, so I don't know. I can tell you theories that I've heard, but if we're talking about what I believe or what I feel is true, I can tell you that. I definitely, like 100% know there is a higher power. From my experiences, both experiences that happened to me and experiences in terms of my own experience, knowing, sensing, being. So I absolutely believe God is real in that way. There is a higher power. There's definitely guiding principle to everything. I believe that the guiding principle is anchored in love and harmony, and that is a part of the essence of creation. So I'm giving God now certain attributes. However, I will not go as far as giving God names because I don't know what that means. What if Yahweh is a being that is extremely evolved comparing to us and indeed created our universe and many others, but maybe Yahweh has or have other gods or gods? We don't really know. We don't have the ability to comprehend with our human mind the breadth of reality.
Hmm.
So I can tell you different theories that I've heard, and I mentioned something similar to one of those theories, but in reality, I don't know. That's why I keep on going back to how layered everything is. And, we can maybe know one layer or begin to know one layer and be convinced that this is the answer, this is everything. But we have to keep in mind there are infinite other layers that are going to unfold and reveal themselves as we expand and we hold the ability to know more, to understand more, to experience more. So it's forever unfolding and unfurling. And God, for me, as I said, is the guiding principle that connects everything and that is anchored in love and harmony.
I love that. And it just makes no sense when people are arguing of what their beliefs in with God. I mean, it's so much more broader and beyond the mind. Yeah, but love, we can something happens when we're more loving, more kind. So going back to your research, that study you talked about with entities, if we believe in a negative God, kind of like what
Crowley?
I forget his name,
I'm out of
Thomas
guesses.
Paine. Thomas
Oh,
Paine
okay.
once said, "A cruel God makes a cruel person." And if
I
we
see.
believe in a fear-based God and that a judging God, a vengeful God, we must fear this God. That creates a whole different reality for a person. But if we focus on the love, like you're talking about, compassionate, even in Corinthians, there's a beautiful saying, "Love keeps no record." And I love that. That eliminates the negative, the judging God, right?
Yeah, we
So yeah.
judge ourselves. So, like, that's when that goes back to what I said that this is all a projection that
Mm.
we as humans bring. And as humans, we are flawed. We are living a reality of dichotomy, of yes, no, good, bad, of contrast. And we can bring that into our beliefs. And it's very easy to bring that into our beliefs. And that's how we create a God that's judging us, a God that wants to punish us, because we are judging ourselves and we want to punish ourselves and others, of course, because we're master projectors. So instead of judging ourselves, we judge others. Instead of seeing how we are in need of alignment, we see how others are flawed and wrong. But it's all the projection of our own inner complexity.
So everything's a mirror.
Everything is a mirror.
That's interesting. Have you had different types of awakenings or just like remembrance, just enlightening experiences that has helped shift your consciousness?
Yes, and those come in two different ways. So one way is the way people usually think about memories. So for example, I've been going to the Monroe Institute for approximately 13 years. And I remember the first program I went to was the Gateway Voyage. A lot of people are familiar with the Gateway program. Since then, I've done maybe 13 other programs, many other programs. But the first one is the Gateway. And during the Gateway, we explore different realms. That's what we usually do, but in the Gateway. And they is now the guides gave me glimpses of one past life and one future life. And they both should be under quotation because time is linear only in our eyes. And the experiences were very, very vivid. It's like I was there physically. It was a full on dropping me in a different body.
Mm.
And like I
Wow.
said, there were an experience of a past life, and then they gave me another gift, an experience of a future life. And I don't feel that the experiences themselves were very meaningful, but what was very meaningful for me was really grasping the reality of it all, of how real it is, and how also even how fluid time is, and again, how real and visceral it is. It's not some hypothetical idea. It's full on realization and hence remembrance of our true nature beyond this physical body. So I've had many experiences such as the one I just described, and those are more memories that come as experiences of remembering, of seeing, of feeling. That's one type. And another type are much more subtle. They usually don't come with big fireworks and big visions and visuals, but sometimes they do. It really depends. But some of them are very, very subtle and very, once again, I'm going to use the word layered. I don't know what's going on with the word layered today, but it's my theme apparently. So some of it are much more nuanced, and it's about an inner remembrance of my true nature And the connection with Hathor has been one of that, of awakening into deeper trust, awakening or remembering my relationship with sound and with music and with my voice. And those are more subtle, and they are layered because they include experiences that I had since I was a very small child to now, but it's not one big thing. It's just layered awakening into our true nature and our true abilities and gifts and our mission of being here at this time. So there are different types of remembrances. Some of them are more obvious than others, and I think we need those just to convince our human mind, our human brain, that it's possible and that it's real, and to anchor this remembrance in our physical senses and our physical reality. But a lot of remembering experiences are more gentle and subtle than that. And sometimes, or even always maybe, even have an even more profound effect on us. But like I said, it may grow over time or just come more deeply from the inside rather than having a visual or visionary experience.
I love that. Thank you. You know, you brought up layered, and one of my favorite verses from Yeshua is, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And I think the more we have we tap into our innermost self, you know, having more, being more self-realized and having, you know, we have less layers. Those layers start to dissolve. The
Exactly.
conditioning, all the belief systems and the labels and the flags and all that. And you can be more in harmony in this dualistic reality with the oneness of life. And then you could see the unnecessary suffering at a deeper level. Like, you know, like even today in America, you see everyone hating each other and the us against them mentality. And it's like all pointless. Like, we're one. Like, let's go back to that love instead of fear and hate. And it does get frustrating at times to be able to see that. But have you
Yeah,
ever oh,
it
go ahead.
gets frustrating and it's pointless only from our physical human perspective.
Yeah.
Because, you know, on a bigger scale, bigger picture, if it's happening, it's not pointless because we're choosing it on some level and there is some gift to be had by experiencing this. But saying that doesn't mean that us as humans should choose that, right? We still choose what activity do we prefer to engage in? What state of mind do we choose to stay in? What kind of thoughts and feelings do we choose to have? And it's true that we don't choose all of our feelings. And a part of the human experience is to deal with different feelings that come up and learning how to honor them and how to take them into account and include them. That's why it's integration. We're including, not removing. However, on another level, we do choose with our preference. And if we choose to be sad most of the time, then it is a choice because the outmost truthful reality is that we are absolutely blessed and privileged to be here at this time. And not only that, that nobody made us. We chose to. And even if they did make us, it's on some higher level that integrates with our own true desires as a soul, as a spirit. So the fact that we chose to be here and the fact that we are here to do some hard work and important work should give all this suffering at least some context and some ability for us to work with it without necessarily suffering, but coming more of a place of compassion for humanities and even for our fellow humans that right now choose to be in hate and in division and in separation and in fear and in control. It's much easier for us to hate them and to reject them than us to have compassion for them. And in this case, and in many cases, the harder path or the less obvious path is the true path that internally, spiritually, is maybe even more simple. But as humans, we tend to complicate things. And we are asked to answer a higher calling of true love and compassion, which includes even holding those that we least agree with in compassion, not endorsing what they're doing, but having inner compassion for where they're at and the journey that they are choosing to enact right now.
I love that. And when I brought that up is like there's an aspect of me that gets frustrated and it's kind of hard to see, but there's another part of me where I know there's an inner knowing where without the muddy waters of ignorance, there couldn't be the sunlight of the spirit of awakening. I think there's a collective awakening emerging as well. Because I look at back at my life, you talked about knowing thyself, and that's a deep saying, because if we're multidimensional, that goes really deep, right? But
Yes.
when I started to understand my own ignorance and how the world and my reactions towards trauma and addiction and so on, when I started to understand that at a deeper level, I could understand it in other people as well, which gives me compassion, right? I always say, and speaking for myself, an unconscious individual was easily changed by the world, but an awakened individual becomes the change for the world, having more compassion, more love, more serviceful, and trying to help raise the vibration versus, keeping it in a lower state, not in an egotistical way, but really just out of the heart, doing it organically, being more in harmony with one another. So, yeah, I think it's a
Yes.
process we're looking at right now, maybe a collective awakening. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. There's absolutely a collective awakening. And you can see it around you. You said there's a lot of hate and division in the United States right now. And it is true, it's worldwide, not only in the United States. But at the same time, a parallel process is more and more people coming together. More and more people are talking about spirituality not in a dogmatic, following rules kind of way, the way the old religions are, but in a way of true inner journey and discovery. And again, we're emphasizing the discovery here. It's not reaching, a certain place and that's it. I'm ascended, I'm enlightened, I'm there. It's really just a journey of discovery and unfolding, unfurling into our true nature and our pure light. And we're seeing that more and more. It's even okay now to talk about it in the mainstream. Even the psychological field talks about energy psychology and other conversations that are bringing in spiritual reality into our reality. And that is a part of humanity awakening into our true nature and into our true possibilities, which are so much more than we were allowed to even express in the past. So it's definitely all around us. If somebody that's listening to us is not seeing it, it's a real red flag for them to remove themselves a little bit from the news and everything that's going on that is telling us that everything is horrible, because there's a lot of everything right now. But what we choose is what we choose to see, what we choose to reflect, and again, what we choose to spend our time being in that space and thinking that way. And it doesn't mean that you have to disconnect from any news and anything that's going on around you, although I'm pretty close to that stage.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you have to. But reduce the consumption of bad news and spend more time connecting to people around you, connecting to nature around you, to increase the time you're spending in a positive headspace and more in a heart space, so you're not only in your head. And that is a big part of what we're talking about, whether we're talking about humanity's awakening or whether we're talking about the rise of the divine feminine. These are not separate, but whatever conversation we have, or whether we're talking about learning to activate our right brain even more, all these different conversations all go back to being more in the heart, living more from the heart and making decisions. Or, making decisions again sounds very active, but just being in that space rather than our head space all the time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that because the more we watch the news, the more it affects us. Even if we start off with awareness, conscious thoughts repeated often, it becomes subconscious thinking, and our thoughts reflect our reality. And if it's all fear, we're being fed fear. I got to be careful with that. So I really don't watch it either
Yeah,
much.
and notice the world around you, You can see what's going on in the news, but you can also see what's going on in your own neighborhood, on your own street, in your own city.
Yeah.
Be connected to your environment in the more immediate way, and that's also a great reflection to where you're at. So again, if you're looking at your neighborhood and your impression is that everyone is unfriendly and everyone is in division, you know that this is your headspace. This is where you're at right now. So the more you're able to shift yourself, the more you will see first nuance and then concrete difference in your environment. But let's start with nuance instead of feeling or thinking that everything is bad, that it's all about division and separation and fear. Start feeling the nuance. There's also connection coming in. There's also more heart openness coming in. There's also more open conversations that are happening. And those are even more important and significant to our journey as humans. They're all important and all significant, but you cannot stay only in the negative, only in the shadow. You need to explore the shadow so you can see it for what it is, not that you can believe it as our only reality.
Yeah, and then you could see, oh, this is how this affected me or caused this reaction. And you kind of laugh about it, but have understanding, kind of have a little laugh like, oh, damn, this created all this suffering for nothing.
Yeah, laughing is important.
Yeah.
It does get us out of our head, out of that intense tunnel vision. It's very hard to laugh and not get a little more lighthearted. And I think it's very important. That's why it's important to not take even your own spiritual evolution, even your inner growth and psychological growth. Don't take it too seriously. Sometimes there are times to be serious, yes, but you can't be serious all the time. You have to be able to laugh at yourself. You have to be able to laugh at other people. And again, not laugh with judgment, but laugh with understanding, laugh with openness, and realize that it's not everything is so bad.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. Not laugh with judgment, but with compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about your book really quick, Conversations with Earth, Channeling Humanity. And what was that like writing that? And maybe you can touch on that for us briefly if you don't mind.
Yes, that was a very interesting experience because this really captures the revolving door aspect as a new channeler. So as a new channeler, you are encouraged to not attach yourself to just one guide and instead to explore different sources, different consciousnesses, different energies coming through. It's just a good way to learn discernment, to expand our own energy and our own minds and frequencies. And the book Conversations with the Earth really explores that part of my journey. So just channeling different types of consciousnesses and energies, whether they're elements or elementals or high councils or galactic collectives, and to again explore and expand both energetically. So as I channel, I merge with that consciousness. So my energy keeps on expanding. My discernment keeps on growing, but also my mind kept on expanding. What does it mean to channel the moon? Who is communicating with me when the moon speaks with words? The moon as a rock doesn't speak to us with words, or does it? So it's been a real mind expanding journey of just understanding what it means that everything is conscious and alive, and also realizing how much wisdom each perspective has to offer with us, to us. So there's some overlap with all of them in terms of like living from the heart and knowing ourselves and knowing that these are very exciting times and we are here for a reason. This is some of the overlap between the different sources, but there are also very specific points of perspective and wisdom that different sources bring. And I found it really enlightening and encouraging and at times funny and fascinating to experience these different perspectives and different essences. So that was a real mind and heart and energetically expanding journey of discovering the most edges of reality.
I love that. And you brought up something, and I want to ask you something about my own experience. Why do sometimes, like, I can be in Mother Nature, right? I'll be in Monterey, for an example, and I feel like I'm like not identified with my body, but I'm still walking in my body. Everything's fully alive. Everything's connected. Everything's vibrant. And, I just fall into that. And then there's times where I'm walking and that's the tree, that's the ocean, it's separate. But I have those moments where I'm like fully connected with the all.
Yeah, yes. These are the moments for us to be inspired, for us to know that it's real. So Edgar Cayce talked about a spiritual ideal. Rather than rather than, I guess, being a perfectionist, working with an ideal is the idea of always moving towards our ideal, which is beyond our ability to achieve, but our constant moving towards it. And those moments of connections, of elateness, of when we're able to hold an altered state but still be in our body, those are moments to aspire to give us a taste of how beautiful the world is when we are resonating with oneness. How just harmony filled, right? And love filled. Even the space, the air, everything around us is when we are in that state. So these are beautiful gifts for us to get a taste of what is possible for us and where we are headed. So when we're talking about human awakening, we're talking about more and more moving towards those spaces, both as individuals, but also in groups and also as humanity as a whole. And think about how beautiful our world would be if, let's just say, 50% of people lived in that space 50% of the time. We would live in a completely different world. So these are just the steps that we're getting closer and closer and closer to our natural state.
What kind of advice has Earth gave you with these conversations for humanity?
Yeah, there have been a lot of different elements, different aspects of the earth give us different types of advice. So the fire, for example, really emphasized how we're so afraid of destruction and we see it as a negative thing, but that destruction and creation are two sides of the same coin. And one is not possible without the other. And the fire knows that more than anyone because fire destroys, again, to our eyes, but it really does create new fertile ground for newness to grow from. And now we're even talking physically, practically, although it's also true spiritually and metaphysically. But even physically, when fire scorches an area, it looks dead, it looks black, but it's not. Again, it becomes very fertile soil and new plants grow, new animals come. So that is, for example, one piece of wisdom that the fire consciousness gave me and gave us to be able to hold that space and not condemn the destructive side of what we're seeing around us, because it is all a part of the same transformation. Another piece of wisdom was that I really, really liked is that we could understand at this evolution that Earth and humanity is going through at this time as puberty. And when we think of puberty, at least in humans, especially in women, but not only, we think about chaos, mood swings. Nothing is stable. Nothing is certain. Nothing is grounded. Everything is just a mess. Definitely an emotional mess. And what the force that drives puberty is not chaos, is not instability. What drives puberty is growth, is growing into maturity, into the next stage, the next evolution. And that is what's going on right now. And we can remember that the driving force of all the chaos that we're seeing around us is not destruction, but the driving force is growth, is evolution. And all that uncertainty and all that chaos is just a part of it.
I love that. And that goes back to knowing thyself. If I look at my own experiences, I've had those destructive behaviors that destroyed a lot of things in my life, but that gave me a deep awakening, and it made me who I am today. So I
Yeah, and it
appreciate that.
also helps us be compassionate. One of the things that I learned, like you said, on my own skin, that any hardships that I experienced essentially made me a more compassionate human being. Even, I'm a clinical psychologist, so even as a therapist, if my life was perfect, which of course there's no such thing, but if my life was always perfect, I would have very little empathy for people that are going through hard time. If I did not experience ever any obsessive or compulsive tendency or experience, it would be very hard for me to relate with compassion to people that are going through, for example, we mentioned addictions. So our experiences are giving us tastes of hardships that then allow us to be more compassionate to other people rather than judging them for not always choosing the right thing and always doing the right thing. So I think that's a big part of it. And maybe that's why experiencing grief is so fundamental to the human experience, because having to deal with loss, having to deal with pain in that way makes us richer, more deeper humans.
I appreciate that. My friend Todd Michael Jackson, he wrote a book called God Beyond Religion, or Greater Than Religion. And in one of his chapters, he says, did Jesus die for your sins? Because if he actually did, it would be pointless for you to, he'll take away your errors, your mistakes, your ignorance, which we learn from. It's much needed in the human experience. So for me personally, I don't think Jesus died for our sins, but he died from the sins of others. If the story is accurate. But yeah, I appreciate that. Did Mother Earth give you? Does she ever talk about? Does she suffer because we're suffering?
I think Mother Earth is a more expansive consciousness than an individual human. And because of that, I think and I hope that the element of suffering is not really there. So if you talk about, for example, the wisdom of the fire, right? And we're talking how creation of destruction is a part of creation. If the earth has a true in-depth understanding and knowing of that, she may not need to suffer when we are suffering as humans and animals may be suffering. There is a hope by me that the earth can hold all of that in a transcendent way that goes beyond suffering.
Yeah, thank you. I asked that because I know Thich Nhat Hanh said, he was once asked, what do we need to save the world? And he said, what we most need to do is to hear within us the sound of earth crying. And I think the purpose of him saying that is for us to have more compassion and be more mindful of the way we're living, because everything affects one another. So
Absolutely. And we use words to describe things. So we're saying the earth crying, but we're using human words to talk about concepts that are much, much bigger than our words. And I think that the largest takeaway is to learn to be in tune with the earth and with nature around us, because it has infinite wisdom to teach us and infinite love to give us. Even it may sound funny, but maybe people have to experience it themselves in order to understand the reality of it. But trees can love us in a way that other humans can't. Our dogs, okay, that's something that more people will relate to. Dogs, our pets, can love us in a way that other humans can't. And it is true. So there's so much that we can take from nature. And when you talk about the earth crying or suffering, I think a part of our human understanding is to reduce suffering consciously, actively, of the earth around us. So if we learn to live more harmoniously with our environment, to cause less damage, less suffering, but actively enhance the love that we're spreading, the goodness that we're spreading, plant a tree instead of cutting down a tree, feed a cat instead of killing a cat, or whatever. I'm obviously super simplifying it. But the idea of being aware of our stamp in the world and in our environment, and to direct it toward loving and creation rather than destruction and restriction, that is us being in tune with the world's earth suffering or crying in that way. But again, it's all our projection, I feel.
Mhm.
But it's our projection, so we can learn other ways, so we can then get in tune with the world smiling, with the earth smiling and laughing and growing.
I appreciate that. Would you like to touch on your latest book briefly?
Sure, yes. So my latest book, Conversations with the Earth, Channeling the Divine Feminine. So although the first book kind of includes all these different sources as a beginner channeler, Conversations with the Earth actually begins before, but most of it is during and after. So Conversations with Hathor, specifically focuses on all the messages I've gotten and my group has gotten from the divine feminine Hathor. She has been one of the first guides that came to me, but I didn't know at the time that she was going to be long-lasting, that she was going to stay with me and become my main guide, my main voice. At that time, it was just one of the many sources that appeared very, very early on. And in this book, we explore a lot. First of all, we touch a lot about channeling because, like I said, it was when I first started. So my group were other beginner channelers, and they would ask a lot about the channeling process and about how to learn trust and discernment. So a lot of the channeling journey is included in Conversations with Hathor. And then we talked also about who and what is Hathor, about their nature, their reality, their interactions with humanity throughout time. And then we talk more about humans and the messages that Hathor has for humans, both individual questions that people ask and also general messages for humanity and what we're going through. So all of that is in Conversations with Hathor. And the book ends with them announcing they are in the physical on Earth once again. So there is a progression of contact from just consciousness, like channeling, to actually being physical beings on Earth, returning to Earth to include physical contact and progress in that direction.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. And how do we find your books and in your links, if you don't mind?
Yes, my website is yafichanneling.com. So YAFI channeling.com. And my books are also on Amazon, both Conversations with the Earth and Conversations with Hathor. You can get them in hard copy, audiobook, or ebook, and I narrate both audiobooks, so you can
Yeah.
actually hear my voice as I don't re-channel them, but I do read specific transcription from the channeling session.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for coming on. I'm going to purchase your book and I want to bring you back and I want to really ask you questions from your book. And I
Excellent.
apologize. I normally do that in advance, but I just haven't been able to do that lately. Been really busy, but I would love to bring you back and have you talk more on your book if you don't mind, and maybe channel if you
Yeah,
don't.
sounds good.
I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Namastizzle.
Oh, namastizzle.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.